If you are interested in the history of conventional medicine and how we got to where we are today, you clicked on the right video. Hi, I'm Dr. Cori Stern, and welcome to my channel, Take Control of Your Health. If you haven't yet had a chance to subscribe, hit the subscribe button now because that is my reward for doing these videos. And if you like the content, don't forget to hit the like button because it helps other people find the video. And last and most importantly, please share this with anybody that you know that you think would benefit from it. So I have a different type of guest today that I'm really excited about. I usually have health experts on, and who I have today is a health expert in a different way. And I'd like to introduce Toni Nagy. Toni is a comedian with a huge TikTok and Instagram following. And she's very interested in the things that I'm interested in, which is natural health and avoiding the poisons of conventional medicine. I stumbled on her. I saw a video that she did. It was an interpretive dance of the history of conventional medicine. And I was just absolutely taken aback by how amazing it was. So I think we should post a link to that video on the description here. And you have a special spot in my heart, Toni, and thank you so much for joining me, because I know that you're really busy and we don't have much time, but I do want to mention that I actually am also a professionally trained actress and I belong to a comedy troupe. I don't talk about that too much. So I felt like we could have a great conversation. So let's get started with, what you said. You told me before that you have go all the way back, you doing research on this topic. Tell me what led you into that?
Okay, well, first, thank you for having me. So I think for me personally, the way I got interested in natural medicine and natural healing is probably how many people get into it is self-motivated. Something happens to your personal body, and then that creates a pause, and you kind of then start to consider what's going on. But in a certain sense, it did come a little earlier for me. Just in the sense that I was born into a culture where my generation of kids was the prototype guinea pig generation for all of these meds around ADHD and attention deficit. And I, in the third grade, was told I went and got tested, and I was told I had ADHD. And the solution for that was to put me on some sort of Ritalin. And I remember being 9 years old and my mother and I leaving the office and getting the recommendation that I take Ritalin, and her being like, okay, so what do you want to do? And I just was like, who would I be if I took this Ritalin? What would happen if I wanted to stop taking it? How would this impact my personality? I had these pretty retrospectively looking back on it, I had these really major existential questions about the impact of being dependent on a drug. Not to say, it hasn't provided value for people. I know it has. I've, witnessed many people who have experienced value. But for me personally, that was the first time I ever kind of questioned, well, is there something else I can do first before I create this relationship to this pill? And what I realized for me personally was oh, I need to move my body a certain amount every single day. I need to expel this energy. Also, I was eating a disturbing amount of candy. I had no regulation from my parents about what I ate. So I was eating immense amounts of sugar, and I just wasn't moving my body enough. And then I began to realize, oh, if I can tire myself out physically, then I might be able to be more still when they needed me to be in school. I mean, also there is this kind of interesting, I was aware that part of my diagnosis was I wanted to connect to my teacher. And so I kept asking questions, and maybe I was just curious, but that was irritating to a teacher because I was like, oh, let's connect and let's get deeper. And they were like, you're annoying. So I understand their perspective. But there was also other things I could do to manage my being annoying, but that ended up being impactful. And, and I avoided taking the Ritalin. So that was, I think, like a seed that was planted in me early on. But as I continued, I was on, I think, birth control pills for a really, really long time because my mother was like, "Oh, you're sexually active. You should be on birth control pills." I did not question it. I did not think about it. I was taking this pill. I cried every single day for years. And I just was like, "Oh, I just cry every day." I mean, I mean, for literally 3 years, I would profusely sweat every single night. To the point where I had a boyfriend and I would just like flip over the the comforter so the sweaty side was on top of him, and I would just do that like multiple times throughout the night. And I never was like, is this a problem that I am sweating profusely every night? I mean, when I think back to how many physical ailments were happening that I was just like ignoring because I was young, there were quite a few. And then at about 25, I had gotten into the organic food movement. I was really, at first I learned about partially hydrogenated oils. So organic food wasn't really like that of a hot button topic then, but a friend had told me about partially hydrogenated oils and how that is why Americans are fatter than Europeans, is because of this oil that their body can't process. And I just was like, oh, that's interesting. So again, like my motivation wasn't like pure in the beginning. I was like, oh, should I be skinnier? It wasn't like particularly deep. But then as I started looking into it and looking into farming, and I was like, holy shit, everything is like food politics and impacts racial politics, impacts immigration, impacts class. Like I just really began to see the full puzzle of food politics and how meaningful it all was and how food was medicine. So I was on this journey of really caring about food and farming, but still taking birth control pills, not even thinking twice about it. And I was at this like hippie conference in San Francisco called Bioneers. And it's like, all the people come and they're talking about world changing things. And at one point, me and this girl, we decided we needed to take a break from the conference. So we walked to a Jamba Juice, very strange. And it's like where it was in California, it wasn't an easy walk. We were like crossing interstates, and we get to this Jamba Juice and we're having this conversation. And I mentioned being on birth control pills. And she was like shocked. She was like, I can't believe you're on birth control pills. You're so into organics. Like, what are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, you could get cancer from being on birth control pills. And like literally the thought that went through my mind was like, oh, maybe I would be skinnier if I wasn't on birth control. Like, again, so superficial, but this was the thought. And as I said this, as I'm contemplating the pill, this man that was like, he was like maybe 4.5 feet tall. He was in orange robes carrying a staff. Like, I'm not kidding. He had no shoes. He was carrying a staff. He looked like this magical being from another dimension. He comes right over to me, only to me, and he knocks on my hand twice. And then he just leaves. And I'm like, did anyone else see this? I mean, my friends saw this person do this, and I was like, okay, I'm never taking birth control pills again. And then I didn't get my period for 2 years. Again, just for 2 years, I was like, this is fine. Who gives a care, not concerned. And then eventually after like 2 years, I was like, maybe I should care, maybe I should care about this. So I finally went to an endocrinologist, and they were like, oh, you might have a brain tumor. And I was like, that sounds really dramatic. And then they did an MRI, and they're like, you have a brain tumor, and it's attached to your pituitary and your hypothalamus. And we can't operate on it because it's attached to these two brain parts. So we're going to suggest like hormone therapy, because as of right now, you're infertile. It could grow. It could cause all these problems. And I was like, hormone therapy? don't you think the hormones I was taking that directly were impacting my pituitary and hypothalamus, telling me I was pregnant all these years, that had something to do with this tumor? And they were like, no. And I think that was the moment where I was like, okay, like, I know I'm going on and on, but you asked. So from there, I was like, and at first they told me I had to come back every 3 months to like monitor the growth. And every time I went, they were just giving me worse news. And I realized I was like, oh, I am reinforcing this by believing in it. And I also realized that like was like beginning to form this identity around being like not well. And I had this almost like unconscious emotional desire that like, oh, I'm not well. I have this brain tumor. So now everyone's going to be nice to me and everyone's going to like treat me the way I always wanted, which was definitely not the case. But I had this fantasy that I was like finally going to be cared for in this way that like I had been craving my whole life. And so like, I was like, wait, what am I doing? Like, I'm identifying with this, I'm believing this, and I'm hoping that this is going to be a means for like people to be kind to me rather than me like developing the boundaries or whatever emotional work I need to do to build relationships where people treat me the way I wanted to be treated. So I that kind of was what began my journey into like holistic healing, energy healing, holistic health, plant medicine, meditation, yada, 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 yada. So that was like the catalyst.
That's an amazing story, and you hit on so many important points, starting with being a child diagnosed with attention deficit, where you probably were just brilliant and creative and active, and they were trying to fit you into a box that you didn't belong in. And their solution is a drug that actually causes damage to the brain cells. And I know you mentioned, people that have benefited from those attention deficit medications, but in my world, I can fix it. Very often there's just some specific nutrients that we can give children.
Yeah.
Also, adults have it too. And suddenly they feel more able to focus. In your case, I think it was just you were being you, and it was irritating to your teacher. So
Yeah,
you
I think I
probably
was
were in
just
the wrong
annoying.
school. Yeah, yeah. And but it's amazing that at that age you understood that that wasn't the choice that you wanted to take. I have a similar story, which I've told ad infinitum on various different podcasts, but I actually, when I was 10 years old, I was suicidal, and I managed to decide that instead of killing myself, I was going to help other people
Mm,
to not suffer. So
mm.
I made that decision around the same age that you went through that. And then at 15, I cured my own chronic throat infection using all natural stuff. I grew up on a junk food diet, so I had been sick for most of my life. That what you described about eating candy, and my mom didn't cook, so we ate fast
Yeah.
food all the time, and yeah. So the other thing that I wanted to mention that you were sort of alluding to is the interesting fact that in the United States, there's something called the FDA, and that is the Food and Drug Administration. And I've always questioned this. Why are food and drugs in the same
Yeah.
department, right? So
Mhm.
from my viewpoint, very simply, we're being pushed to eat food that causes us to be sick and require then pharmaceuticals to fix
Yeah.
the symptoms of malnutrition. And the other thing I just want to say real quick is that I'm sorry I didn't know you when you were going through your pituitary tumor, because I actually have a lot of patients with that, and probably the same cause, the exposure to birth control for all those years. But not only that, sometimes it's just eating foods that are high in hormones. Eating cows that are shot up with estrogen,
Yeah.
and it's a fairly simple fix. So You figured it out on your own. God bless you. You did a great job. But I probably could have, in an instant helped you to not have it anymore. And
Yeah,
if
I
you,
guess I needed to go through a 2 year emotional. I mean, I think that's the other thing that became really obvious to me during this time is that any illness or any, physical ailment is an opportunity for spiritual growth. It's like the higher self is screaming to the ego through the language of the body. And that is what became clear to me is like, I was working with like a Reiki healer and she said, you created this tumor and you can take it away. And I think some people might feel that like as like victim blamey, but I am a Capricorn, I like challenges. So I was like, yes, I did create this and I can take this away. Like to me, I found that like almost an empowering idea. And it put all the responsibility on me, which I actually felt was an important psychological shift. So I like really had to commit in my mind that I could heal myself and that I had a very I mean it I wonder if you could call it dogmatic, but I just was like, I was just refusing. I was refusing any sort of other narrative. I was like, no, I believe I can fully heal this. I believe this with like the depths of my soul. And I think since then, I do see all physical ailments I've had, which have been plenty, over the past decade, as these like necessary events for me to do like massive self-reflection. But at the same time, like I have lived with suffering, like like I had like a yeast infection for 6 weeks once, because I was like, I'm not taking Monistat and I was trying all the natural things, but then I had to have like, I literally had like one emotional, like circuit that fixed. And then I was like, oh, that was the lesson of my 6-week yeast infection. And then it was literally gone the next day. So I do think that like, because I have this attitude, like sometimes I do experience things for a longer time than just like taking an antibiotic or whatever. But I was like, no, I have a lesson to learn. Yeah.
no,
And
it's really,
it's an irritating lesson.
it's true though that your beliefs actually create, your beliefs create your reality. So whether
Yeah.
that's in relation to your physical body or any other dynamics in your life, I actually have a video where I interviewed somebody whose area of expertise is dealing with beliefs in relation to health. So that is so true. And the whole victim thing is, in my opinion, is a setup that the conventional medical system has created because you become completely powerless and dependent on this person's recommendations for toxic chemicals to suppress symptoms. And that just puts you into being a victim right there. And that's why the name of my channel is Take Control of Your Health. Um, the whole point of it is to just change your whole viewpoint in relation to how to be healthy. So you figured that out on your own. And I do want to also let you know that there are also some physical changes that you can make to prevent things like yeast infection. So the combination of your changing the way you view it, the way that you refuse to use conventional means to do it, like Monistat, and add into that some fungus prevention. Really, like it's kind of like waterproofing your home. You can fungus proof your body so that
Yeah,
you don't.
no, I'm sure. I'm sure there's a lot of things one could have done. But I think like to me, what became and has become clear, also through giving birth and like I was really committed. I wanted to have a natural birth and I was committed to that. I knew I wanted to do that. And I definitely, while going through that process, I remember the point where I was like, oh, this is where people want to give up. This is where they're like, give me the epidural because it was so difficult and it required like a deep trust in myself and like, and a commitment. Like if I hadn't been that committed, I know exactly the moment where people are like, I can't take it anymore. And I think the same thing is like happening a lot of times with our health, is that genuinely addressing these issues often takes a lot of patience. It takes experimentation, and it takes commitment, and it takes time, and it takes knowledge, and it's effort, and it's spiritual work, and it's emotional work. I mean, that was like 10 things I listed versus like, oh, here is an authority figure that knows more than you, and they do know more than you in a certain sense about what they've been taught. And that authority figure is saying, well, you could also just do this, rather than like the 10 things that you would have to do otherwise. And I think that in a capitalist world, not everybody has the time, not everybody has the space, not everybody has the support, not everybody has the finances. Like, we are set up to be desperate when we're not feeling well, and to just like, fuck, I got to take this NyQuil because I have to go to work the next day. There's nothing that I can do. And so I feel as if, because of our capitalist culture, so many people are just set up to be controlled by these authority figures, because they don't have the time, space, support, resources, et cetera, to do this kind of exploration. And I think for me, that was something that was also very clear, is that I was like living with my aunt when I was dealing with my healing. She was not charging me rent, like I had people that were there to let me do this, like gave me the time and space to do that. And that is like a big part of I think, conversation that I'm thinking about right now, as to like why it's so hard for people. They just don't have that time.
And people are also really, really programmed
Mm-hmm.
to not even consider other possibilities. So people that watch my channel and people that come to me for help with their health are people that have either shaken off the programming or want to, are starting, like you did years ago, starting to recognize this isn't working, something's not right. I'm tired of not feeling well. I need to do something different. So I had a consult with somebody today who was 58, and she had been feeling horrible, severe fatigue for many, many years. And she said that to me. She said, I can't go on this way anymore. I need to do something different.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So from your, in a kind of a quick synopsis, like you did in your interpretive dance, what did your research tell you about the history of how we ended up with this kind of victim, pharmaceutical, toxic, bad food world that we live in? How did we get here?
Well, I think like there's a couple key players involved, but one of the things I was talking about in the video you saw was that John D. Rockefeller, who is the father of oil and petrochemicals, he basically saw an opportunity to vertically integrate his brand into medicine so that medicine could be made with oil, with petrochemicals. But in order to shift the public consciousness into taking this medicine rather than the natural medicines that people have been taking for thousands of years. I mean, there were no synthetic medicines before John D. Rockefeller, basically. He had to control the media, which he already did, and B, he had to control education, which was pretty easy in the sense that he could just give these massive grants to the major institutions, Yale, Harvard, et cetera, and basically make the demand, I will give you this grant under the condition that you teach my program, you teach my curriculum, you teach what I am telling you to teach around medicine. P.S. He was not a doctor, he was a tycoon, he was a businessman. So basically what John D. Rockefeller and all these guys understood was this concept of vertical integration, where you can kind of own a business from all these multiple entry points, and your product will be profitable through these different mediums. So if you, like you were saying beforehand, if you are creating the synthetic drugs that make people sick, and then you're creating this, or you're creating the food that make people sick, and you are the solution to the problems that you're creating. This is what happened with both medicine and food. And the other thing is that they did discover during this time that a lot of the synthetic drugs were causing cancer. And the solution to that was to create the American Cancer Institute, which was funded by John D. Rockefeller. So that was another way of controlling the narrative. So, basically what happened was any doctor that was trying to practice natural medicine was then demonized. Their license was taken away. They were publicly shamed. Articles were written about them. It was pretty easy to just destroy a reputation.
He actually commissioned a study to gather evidence that natural stuff doesn't work.
Yeah,
and that was part of the whole evil plan. And
even though all of the synthetic medicines are based off of natural products, they use the medicine part of any synthetic medicine is a plant. That's the medicine.
Right. I mean, take aspirin, which it was derived from white willow bark, and the active constituent in that is salicylic acid.
Yeah.
Which is what aspirin was modeled after. So
yeah,
100%. And to your point about the cancer industry, I just want to say that rather than pumping your delicate breast tissue full of radiation to look for the possibility of something wrong in there, and knowing that radiation causes cancer, there are alternative approaches, something that I offer in my practice called thermography, which is a infrared camera that takes a picture of you can do your whole body and see heat patterns and inflammation patterns even before they turn into a problem. When a tumor is growing, it requires extra blood source. So you start developing more vessels around the tumor, and the infrared camera can pick that up. So, the whole cancer industry we could have a whole video just on that topic. And I just want to quickly talk about food for a minute, because we already know, and my whole show is about the importance of eating clean, nutrient-dense food. So if you're someone that understands the role that food plays in your health, then I have good news. So there's a website that you can find and get matched to a small-scale family farms that grow and sell super clean, high-quality food in your area if you're in the US. If you're not in the US, I have a different link. It'll be in the description of the video. So it's www.farmmatch.com/Dr. Cori. I'll put the link in the video. You put in your zip code and you'll be matched to a farm near you. Some of them you can go and pick it up. Some of them deliver, some of them ship. If you are in a food desert where there is no farms, there's still going to be a match with a farm that would be willing to get the food to you. So I get almost all my food from one of these farms, and it's been a game changer for myself, my son, my dogs. And I really think the best way to change the world is by voting with your food dollars. So I'd love for you to support Farm Match. They're a nonprofit organization completely committed to just helping people find good food. So Toni, if you don't have a farm in your area, I'll help you find one if you want.
Oh, thank you. I'm really lucky. I live in a pretty farm heavy place, but I'm in rural New Hampshire. So
okay, yes, yeah. I'm in the middle of New York City. There's no cows around here. So I get my raw dairy from a farm in Pennsylvania that delivers.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So any last words that you want to share before I know you got to get going?
Last words I want to share. I think the main thing that I would share is that, our health and our bodies is about having curiosity and exploring and experimenting a little bit, because what works for one ecosystem isn't necessarily going to work for the other. And I think that we have to both have humility and confidence in our own intelligence around our bodies. And I think one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is just how in this post-truth age where you can basically prove anything you want on the internet, anything you want to think, you can find someone who agrees with you. So it's really, I think, more crucial than ever that we tap into our intuition and our gut instincts. And there obviously has been like a major hijacking of the gut and of our intuition, because if you think of all the products, all the plastics, all the chemicals, all the forever chemicals, they are impacting our pituitary and our hypothalamus, which is linked to our intuition, linked to our sense of self, right? So we're constantly being like
hijacked. Yeah.
intentionally hijacked to not be able to connect to our own intuition around this stuff. So I think the more, we have time and take pause to like just check in, like, does this feel right for me? Because plants are really powerful. Not all, sometimes I can go too hard on like, and I'll take too many things and they're all natural and organic, but it was too much. And I ended up like, oops, I kind of like made myself ill because I was going too hard on trying to get better. So I've done this I've made this mistake multiple times.
Trial and error. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's like having the connection to yourself and your body is the most crucial, because ultimately, the more you can just feel when something is right or something is wrong for you, then I think that's when you're going to make the best choices.
Beautiful message. Thank you so much. I'll put a link to your Instagram and TikTok in the description of this video. So check Toni out. She has excellent videos if you want a good laugh and learn something. And please don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you were meaning to do that and haven't had a chance. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video so other people can find it. And last and most importantly, please share this with anybody you know that you think would benefit from it. And until I see you again, please stay healthy.